Today we are going to explore the topic of validation. Does it serve you? Could be a really juicy topic. Stick around for episode 30 on the Reinventing Thyself podcast. We all have situations, experiences, and moments in our life when we know deep at our core we have to do something different. We have to pivot. And regardless of how big or small that pivot is, it requires us to change something in our life. And that change can feel really uncomfortable. However, it is that change that is creating something entirely new. And it is that newness that creates a very different way of life in one area or multiple areas of our life. What's this all about? It is all about reinventing thyself. My name is Michelle Shutter, and I'd like to welcome you to Reinventing Thyself. I am so glad that you joined me today because it is here that we'll move beyond our old self, our old identity, and that trailer of garbage from the past that we like to pull into the future, but really need to ditch that hitch. It is here that we'll move into that place of reinvention and embracing the newness of it all. Are you ready to step into reinventing thyself? Because guess what? It is never too late, and your time is now. Let's get started. Hey, welcome back to this week's episode 30. Does validation serve you? I am really thrilled that you are here because validation is one of those topics that teeters back and forth. And today we are going to explore that in a deeper way. So I'm excited that you're here. And don't forget that if there's something that resonates with you or something that was like, oh yeah, make sure you let me know. You can tag me on one of the social media outlets, just even taking a screenshot of the podcast and posting it, or you can message me, whatever works easiest for you, but I would love to hear about it. And when we're looking at validation, that is a topic too that we certainly can reinvent ourselves around. Because don't forget, reinventing ourselves is really about leaning into that pivot that is happening in our life. And it doesn't have to be something big. It can be just something really tiny as well that really allows us to grow in some way. Because when we can embrace that change and learn the life lessons, it really allows us to move boldly and bravely through new beginnings and beyond. And when we're moving through that transition, it really allows us to access our greatness and in that space, what I call the gap from where we are to where we want to be. So validation, let's talk about that a little bit more. One thing I find really interesting about social media, and there's no judgment around this whatsoever, is, some people post and they may not even know that they're posting this, like it could be super unconscious, is that whole post where they're seeking validation, right? So they go out on a rant or opinions of something or frustrations, and they just let it all out on social media. Again, no judgment there. And it's just really interesting to see what conscious level they're coming from when they post it. And I want to explore validation in like two different ways. So one side of validation, we have internal validation, and the other side of validation, we have external validation, right? Makes sense. So when I'm referring to internal validation, I'm looking at that space within you where you are serving your true self. And that internal validation is almost a grounding, a powerfulness within you that you know, like you know, like you know. Like you are so connected to your inner knowing and you trust that process that you're going through, that the only validation you require is what you are receiving internally. And don't get me wrong, it can teeter back and forth, but I just want to be clear on what I'm sharing in terms of internal and external validation. Now, external validation is a little bit trickier because the majority of people actually rely on external validation. And you might think, well, why? Why is that? Well, because we've become so disconnected from our true self, from that inner being, from that intuition, from that gut, from that inner knowing, that it's very infrequent that we look for internal validation. Rather, we are seeking external validation. And that external validation is giving us a hit in some way, right? It is giving us a feeling. It is giving us a space to be, yep, that's it. Like, that's what I need to move forward. And the one thing, a question that we want to ask ourselves when we're seeking external validation is why? Why are we seeking that validation from somebody else? What is holding us back from receiving that validation from ourselves, that internal validation? And when we are looking for others to create that validation for us, we have to proceed with caution. And the reason why I say that is because some people are going to validate or provide that validation to you based on their experience. So if you're seeking validation from somebody around a topic that they had a terrible experience with, how is that going to impact what they are going to share with you? It is not going to be a neutral space. It is going to be influenced by what he or she went through. One thing we want to keep in mind as well is that we want to be aware of the intention that the person is providing, and we want to feel into that intention. So again, is that validation? Are they providing that validation from based on their experiences? Is it neutral, or is it empowering us in a way? And again, there's no judgment, but this is something you have to discern for yourself. You have to create some awareness around that. Now, if I go back to that first person where that person's using their experience to validate you, what happens if they don't validate you the way you are expecting that to happen? How does that resonate with you? How does that impact you? Does it impact you positively? Does it impact you negatively? They're all just great things to really reflect on and create some clarity around the internal validation versus the external validation. Now, you may think, well, my gosh, yeah, that question, like, why am I seeking validation? I'm going to share with you just some hidden reasons that you could be seeking validation. And sometimes when we're in that energy level of, being angry because we're looking for the validation, or we're hurt, or we're frustrated, and we go out on social media and we type this out, right, and release it to the world, we have to look at, okay, why are we doing that? And you're going to get comments from other people, right? So why are you seeking that? So one of the reasons perhaps is because there's a deep level of wanting to be right. That validation, that external validation that you are seeking will confirm, hopefully in your mind, that you are right. That you're not wrong in this, that you're right. And so when you hold that energy, how does that feel to you? And remember, like energy is going to attract like energy. Is that the space you want to continue to operate in? You need to ask yourself that. Another reason is why we're seeking perhaps that external validation is because we're playing in the victim mode. And a lot of times we don't even realize it. And perhaps even me just mentioning it on this podcast right now may trigger you. And that's a good thing. Not because I want to create angst in you or make you mad or angry. Like, I really don't have the power to do that, because you are fully in control of your thoughts and feelings. I don't have that power, nor does anybody else in your life. Only you can choose your thoughts and feelings. And when we're in that victim mode, though, we're really in a disempowering energy. And that energy doesn't serve us at our highest level. It serves us, but it isn't something that is sustainable. It isn't something that we want to repeat over and over again. And this is something I actually dive into more on the Greatness to the Gap in that webinar. And if that is something that you're interested in learning more about, you certainly can go to greatnessinthegap.com, and all the information is there that you can see that. Another reason why we seek external validation is because there's uncertainty about our skills, about our actions. We're lacking that confidence. And when that happens, again, we want somebody outside of us to say, yes, you're good, right? You're good. But what if we could shortcut that and just tap into our internal validation and be like, yeah, you're good, move on. And the fourth reason that I want to share with you why we're seeking external validation, perhaps, is we're questioning our self-worth. In that, whatever we're looking at to do, to improve, to a new result, to transition, to move it through that gap at a different rate, there's that piece of self-worth that comes up where we're questioning it. We're doubting ourselves. We're wondering if this was really what we were supposed to do. And so we're seeking some external validation. But in all honesty, when it comes to that's external validation is only going to be temporary. It isn't going to sustain you until you really move into that space of internal validation and really connecting with that piece of you, that inner knowing, that inner being, that true self. It doesn't matter what you call it, but it's reconnecting in that place. So again, you can balance between internal and external validation, but at some point, you're more than likely going to want to tip the scale and have it more sustainable. And that's what you receive in the internal validation. Right now, it may be completely lopsided, right? Like, I have very little internal validation and it's a lot of external. Perhaps then it's to do the work around that to bring it back to balance, and then maybe even raise that internal validation, because that will serve you more powerfully. You know, I want to give you an example and look at this even a little bit deeper. So I go on social media and I post that, I don't feel validated. I don't feel valued. I'm sick of this, blah, blah, blah. And so I want you to think about that, or perhaps it's a different situation in your life, like how that person or perhaps you would be feeling. And the first thing that came to mind was hurt, right? That feeling is hurt. And then I want to back up and think about, okay, why am I having that thought? Or why am I having that feeling? What is the thought? Well, that thought might be, no one cares what I do. No one appreciates me. So I feel hurt. And then I'm going to take that another step and look at, okay, what actions am I taking? Well, it could be one of two things. It could be, I stop taking some action. I'm not going to do this anymore. Or I'm going to overdo it and I'm going to do the actions even more and amplified, and I'm going to just do it all. And then I want you to think about, like, what's the result of that? And for many people, especially women, that action of doing it all comes into play. And where does that lead? It leads down that road of overwhelm, burnout, exhaustion. And so that's the result you get. And yet you continue to loop in that over and over and over again because you haven't created the self-awareness around what's really going on, nor have you taken the time to dig deep into this. So when you're in the midst of this, pick a new feeling. Well, some people are like, yeah, I want to feel joyful. I want to be really happy about it. Okay, well, that's great. But if you're in this space of feeling really hurt right now, how realistic is it that you're going to be able to switch and go all the way to the other end of the spectrum and pick happiness or joyful? It more than likely isn't going to happen. So think about it in terms of, what is a feeling that feels a step up from hurt? Could you feel that feeling temporarily? And if you could, what is the thought that would support that feeling? And when you feel good in that space, then pick the next feeling up. And eventually you may be able to skip a few steps. You want to create that feeling in the end that is going to serve you at a high level, that is going to be connected to that true self within you. And you want the thoughts that are going to support that. Your thoughts create your feelings, which drive your actions and produce your results. It's a simple tool that we explore and will be exploring in depth in the life coaching classroom. And the one thing that I want to end with today is that whether you pick internal or external validation, it's a choice. And you might want to resist and push back on that. And I get it. I completely understand it, because for so long that external validation has felt so good. It's felt so good to get that recognition from somebody else. It's felt so good to know that I was right. It felt so good to have somebody else confirm my self-worth and not necessarily, and confirm my skills and abilities, and I don't have to question any of it. But in the end, you have to decide which one is going to serve you more powerfully for the long term. Lean into that space and start to question yourself. Start to question before you hit post on that social media post. Question yourself. What are you seeking? Why are you seeking it? What is holding you back from receiving the internal validation? Validation is a topic that we also will be talking about and exploring and pulling the layers back in the life coaching classroom. And so I want to extend an invitation to you. If any of this resonated with you, you're going to want to get your name on the wait list, because when we open the doors, you absolutely are going to be one of the first ones that are going to be able to test drive life coaching in a group format. How amazing to think that I could try this out to see how this improves my life, and then make that decision. Yes, I am going to move forward and use this as a way to increase my connection to my true self. Use this as a way to improve areas of my life that are great right now, but I want them to be even better. Like, how powerful is that? And because the first people that I open these doors to are going to be able to do that. They're going to be able to test drive this at a crazy price, a crazy great price. Like you are going to be like jaw dropping. What? Yeah, exactly. So the details are at lifecoachingclassroom.com. If you have any questions regarding that, make sure you reach out because I am more than happy to answer any questions that you have. But as we wrap up today, that question that I started episode 30 with is, does validation serve you? And perhaps I should change that even into, what type of validation serves you? Only you get to decide that. And I can't wait to hear what resonates with you. So make sure you drop me a message, tag me on the social media platforms at Michelle Shutter, and let me know where you're going in terms of validation. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please share it with a friend, a neighbor, a sister, a coworker, someone that would benefit from this podcast. I would deeply appreciate that. And don't forget to hit the follow or subscribe button so that when our next episode drops, you are getting it delivered to your inbox. Until next time. Well, what are you waiting for? Whether you've pivoted and are unsure or you're on the verge of pivoting, there is no better time than now for you to begin. Want to know why? Because if it wasn't the right time, the pivot wouldn't have shown up. And to get you started, I've got 3 shortcuts to reinventing thyself. Just head on over to www.reinventingthyself.com and you can download it there. And don't forget to message me with the shortcut that resonates with you the most. One last thing. I know you and I are not the only ones that have leaned into the pivot. Be sure to share this with others so they can be supported too. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you for supporting me and sharing this message. Until next time.